Live from Washington, D.C., Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Sekulow.
Welcome to the broadcast, everybody. We got a surprising win out of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit involving Title X planning. And this is, again, this prohibition of using federal money for abortion. So here's what happened. A federal court of appeals yesterday said that the administration's policy, which was take effect nationwide, delivered the way, and this is interesting because this is Politico saying it, delivered a major blow. That's how they're saying it, to Planned Parenthood and states challenging the overhaul. This is the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals granted the Trump administration's request to lift a national injunction. There was a national injunction in place, ordered by federal courts in Oregon and Washington state, as well as statewide in California. A panel of 3 judges, as Politico notes, all appointed by Republicans, so judicial nominations have consequences, said that the administration will likely prevail in its legal battle over Title X family planning programs, since the Supreme Court held similar Reagan-era rules almost 30 years ago constitutional. Let me go to Laura Hernandez, senior counsel for the ACLJ. She worked on our briefs on the case. Laura, what was actually at stake here?
About $60 million in federal funding, but what the appellate court said was that the district courts essentially substituted their judgment for that of the agency, and that was unacceptable. The district court was very critical of the district court, saying that they basically ignored the government's arguments to reach the result they wanted to, which was essentially to sustain Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers' continued access to federal funds. Okay, so let me ask you this, Cece. So
Planned Parenthood what exactly were they asking for? I mean, what were they desiring to get? They keep saying that we don't use federal money for abortions, which I think has always been a bit of a shell game.
Title X gives federal funds to family planning clinics, but you cannot offer abortions. So, of course, that's where Planned Parenthood, gets upset, because that's what their main business is. And they still want to have access to this federal funding. So Title X basically says if you're going to provide abortions, then you have to separate those physically. So the buildings have to be physically separate and your finances have to be physically separate. Of course, Planned Parenthood doesn't want to do that. So that was why Planned Parenthood was up in arms, is because this requires them now to separate their family planning from their abortion.
And they are the largest provider of abortions in the country. So, Laura, the legal argument, they talk about Russ versus Sullivan. Let's talk about that for a moment.
That is a Supreme Court case that back in 91 that upheld regulations that were materially indistinguishable from those just enacted in the Trump administration.
So that's a very important point, Than. This has been a law for 30 years, and Congress just recently approved it again. And you have this whole, argument, but they're trying to use the courts to undo it, no question. But talk about the length. We only got a minute here before the break. How long this has been around?
Well, it's a great example, Jay. I mean, it was established in 1970, the Title X program. It was very clear. It said none of the funds appropriated under this title shall be used in programs where abortion is a method of family planning. And yet, Jay, that is exactly what happened. And just quickly, I would say we can expand on this. This is a great example of us being involved from the start to the end. We advocated for this rule. We commented on this rule. We defended it in court. And, Jay, because of yesterday, a ruling out of the Ninth Circuit with those new justices, it's going to stand. From start to end, we were involved in this.
Oh, I think, and it goes to the Supreme Court of the United States. I think we win, clearly. That's my prediction on that case. So good decision there. All right, we're taking your calls. I want to know from you, how important is the life issue to you, both in the election and just personally? Is this life issue a big issue for you? It is certainly for us at the American Center for Law and Justice. We're getting ready to take a break. You're talking about life victories, and your support of the ACLJ makes this happen. So we're in a matching challenge campaign. Let me encourage you to go to aclj.org. Any amount you donate to the ACLJ is matched. aclj.org, or call the number on your screen. Back with more in just a moment.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines defending life and liberty. engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.
This decision of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. Cece was bringing up a very good point during the break I want to go back to. But before we do that, let me go to Harry Hutchison here. Harry, I'm looking at the law. You've taught law school for a long time. The law, Russ versus Sullivan, we talk about a Supreme Court case that served as the basis for this decision. This is not a new decision.
Absolutely not. And so we should go back even further to 1970. Congress enacted Title 10 to create a limited grant program for certain types of pre-pregnancy planning services. The precise statutory language of Title 10 states that none of the grant funds appropriated under this subsection shall be used in programs where abortion is a method of family planning. And then secondarily, we should point out that in Russ versus Sullivan, the Supreme Court upheld a similar rule. And so the 2019 version of the rule substantially reinstates the rule which was issued in 1988, and yet we have 3 district courts who are committed to revisionist history who are now claiming that a rule that complies with the Supreme Court decision ought to be invalidated. This is nonsense. And these district courts need to be placed on notice that the law ought to be enforced. And I think clearly the Ninth Circuit decision is a step in the right direction.
Every time we say the Ninth Circuit decision, step in the right direction, it seems so contrary to everything we've been saying.
Yes.
But you got 3 good judges, 3 judges that made the right decision. Laura, let me go to you on this. But we did have district court judges that issued these nationwide injunctions. So what were they saying? What was their argument?
They bought the Planned Parenthood argument hook, line, and sinker, which was that subsequent laws, which had nothing to do with Title X, didn't even mention Title X, somehow repealed the department's authority to promulgate those regulations. It was totally bogus.
Yeah, well, and 3 judges in the Ninth Circuit have now acknowledged that. Let me play for you Planned Parenthood's reaction. This is from Leanne Wen. She is the president of Planned Parenthood. Take a listen.
The Title X gag rule is censoring doctors and nurses. It's the government telling doctors and nurses what we can and cannot say to our patients. It's unethical, it's illegal, it's dangerous. More than 100 medical, nursing, and public health organizations have spoken up against the gag rule because this is not the kind of ethical medicine that we took an oath to do.
All right, so let me go to Cece Howell on this. You think that fundamentally that statement is incorrect?
Absolutely. And what's amazing, too, is she's talking about then their First Amendment rights. Russ v. Sullivan addressed that as well, that Title X does not affect First Amendment rights. It's not a violation. This is simply the government saying, look, we're going to give some funding, but these are the rules you have to comply with to get that funding, which the federal government can absolutely do.
Has the right to do it. All right, we're going to the phones. Let's go to Cheryl. She's calling from Florida. Cheryl, welcome to the broadcast. You're on the air.
Hi, thank you.
Sure.
I just wanted to voice my opinion about the abortion topic.
Yep.
It's extremely important to me who I vote for, what party I vote for. I had an experience in 1978 while serving in the U.S. Army. I was stationed in New York at West Point, and I was assigned to OBGYN, and they had just started doing at that time they called them an ETOP, early termination of pregnancy.
Right.
And I was young. I didn't know what they were asking me to do, but they had me assist. And that was an experience I had with abortion, seeing the dismemberment of a tiny human being. And ever since then, I mean, I know it's murder, you know. So for me, it's extremely important. It's millions of lives are at stake. So that was all I wanted to say.
No, I appreciate you calling in, Cheryl. Appreciate your service to the country and the Army, and also pointing out what you experienced. Than, let's go to this issue of abortion. It's clear that there is that those running left of center, we'll say the Democratic Party, there is very little room, probably no room in that party right now for anybody that's pro-life.
Oh, there's no room at all. I mean, look at Joe Biden. For 30 years, he supported the Hyde Amendment, which is a very measured law, Jay, that says that taxpayer dollars will not be used to fund directly abortions domestically. He has flip-flopped to try to win that primary, Jay. There's no room for a measured response on this issue. But I would just say, in response to the statement that was made by Planned Parenthood, that's a direct lie, Jay. And there are other lies being propagated here, too. She also went on to say that it's going to be putting millions of women at risk for health care services. Jay, let's be very clear about this. The $286 million that were authorized every year under Title X, those will now be free to be used for women's health care services for which they were attended rather than pillaged for abortion. This actually helps access for women accessing health care.
That was the point you were making, Cece.
Absolutely. So Planned Parenthood tries to, again, play kind of what I say the shell game or smoke and mirrors. So they make completely false statements. They're saying, well, now, we're cutting down the access to these Title X services. But what it does is it opens up money so many more Title X, family planning service centers can actually get funds, and it actually expands women's access to those services.
This is certainly the position of the administration. Here is the Secretary, Alex Azar. Take a listen.
We actually have federally qualified health centers and their various affiliates outnumber Planned Parenthood by 20-1, giving a broader reach of services throughout this country in more rural areas, better depth, providing care, preventive services, cancer treatment, HIV treatment, etc. So we are ensuring a broad range of services, but consistent with statute. And of course, Planned Parenthood can and is a grantee under our regulations if they maintain the fiscal and physical separation that is the law requires and the other protections that President Trump has imposed here.
But Laura, the fact of the matter is they don't want to do that. I mean, that's the reality, right?
Oh, that's absolutely correct.
And so, Than, when you look at that fact, that they don't want to do it, they don't do it, it's moving the money around. That's why Congress has been so specific.
Well, and they've gotten away with it for decades, Jay. I mean, look, the statute is unambiguous here. I mean, none of the funds available are supposed to be used for programs that use abortion as a method of family planning, and yet Planned Parenthood has gotten away with it. They take the dollars, then they use other funds for the abortion. But, Jay, I want to say it again. It is a dollar-for-dollar robbing of women's health care when you give it to Planned Parenthood as opposed to health clinics that will actually use it for the services for which it was intended. And, look, I'll say this again. I know sometimes people can get, their eyes can get glazed over at this process. You have to fight this, Jay, from the beginning. You have to advocate for the rule, then you have to comment in defense of the rule when you get an administration willing to do it, and then you have to defend it in court. And again, where was this win, Jay? The Ninth Circuit. The more justices you get, the more of these friendly panels we've drawn. We've said it a lot. It's a huge victory.
Well, we were all very happy that it was the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And the first thing I asked was, who are the judges? And the reason you asked that is because who the judges are, Professor Hutchinson, makes a big difference on the judicial plane.
Absolutely.
And this was a good draw.
Absolutely.
If you're on our side.
And so it raises the issue of judicial selection and the importance of elections, because elections have consequences with respect to judicial nominees, the philosophy on which they are selected. And I think President Trump has taken a massive step in the right direction through the nomination of additional judges who believe in the rule of law and who believe in interpreting the text of the Constitution as written. I think it's clear beyond question that if you look at Title X, the precise language of Section 1008, which was essentially the section under which this litigation proceeded, the legislation specifically supports the rule enacted by the Department of Health and Human Services. And yet you have the president of Planned Parenthood arguing that the rule is illegal, that it violates the law. She doesn't understand the law. She simply wants the American people to continue to fund and subsidize abortion.
All right, so right now we've got 16 Democratic appointees on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, 11 Republican appointees. One more, Daniel Bress, is pending. So, Than, it's moving closer.
Changing rapidly, Jay. I mean, 6 of those that you mentioned are appointees from President Trump. So 6 of the 29 judgeships are now belonging to Trump. Daniel Bress will be the 7th. There's 1 more vacancy, so probably 8 before too long. And again, Jay, you're 5 more seats away from sort of flipping the balance, even though it's obviously not a partisan thing necessarily. But today is a great example. We've said it so many times. You don't have to flip the balance to get a good draw and get better law out of that circuit.
Laura, let me ask you a last question here for you, and that is next move. Do you think they're going to go for en banc review? That is the entire Ninth Circuit?
They already have. They filed an emergency petition last night.
Okay. So that means, folks, that now the entire Ninth Circuit's going to weigh in. So how long this victory stays in place, we'll see. But it also means it's going to get to the Supreme Court of the United States. And I think at the Supreme Court of the United States, we carry the day. Laura Hernandez, we appreciate your work on this case. And as Stan said, we filed it in the comment stage. We filed it in the litigation stage. And if it goes now to the en banc, we'll be filing it there. So your support of the American Center for Law and Justice makes a huge difference. You can support the work of the ACLJ by simply going to aclj.org. I encourage you to do that, aclj.org. Any amount you donate is tax deductible, and we appreciate that. It allows us to do the work around the country and, frankly, around the globe. We'll be back with more, including your calls, in just a moment.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.
The Guttmacher Institute, which is a Planned Parenthood controlled organization, points the number of abortions a year at about 1 million. Over a third of those, about 330,000 of those abortions, are performed by Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is the single largest entity performing abortions. There are other facilities that may be affiliates of Planned Parenthood or independent abortion clinics out there that are performing a lot of abortions as well. But the number is staggering. It's over 1 million a year.
Most states don't regulate. So I think what we need to look at is the business of abortion. And the business of abortion starts with a sale.
Honestly, it's not hard to sell an abortion to a woman who is vulnerable, who's scared, particularly if they're young, if they're in college, if they sort of have some goals.
They know exactly what they're doing. They're putting those babies' body parts together in the back room. They know they're killing babies. And most people working in the abortion clinic make more money than they can anywhere else. And so they are paid to look the other way and kill babies, and they know it.
All right, everybody, last segment. Kathy on Facebook says, when did abortion begin to define party lines? Fan. It's been going on for a long time.
Well, it's been trending that way for a long time, but I'll tell you, when I started my career in Washington, D.C. about 20 years ago, it was not hard to find a pro-life Democrat. It's almost impossible now, Jay, and it's not just because they've been defeated in general elections. It's because they've been primaried out.
Yes.
It is no longer acceptable inside the Democrat Party to be pro-life. And look, I think the proof is in the pudding. When you go down to defend the Hyde Amendment on the floor of the Senate, you can't find anyone there on the Democrat side of the aisle to support you. And by the way, if you do, what happens when you decide to run for president like Joe Biden did? Planned Parenthood comes out and forces you to change your position. That's just reality.
I'll tell you something interesting. When we first were doing these briefs for Congress, we would oftentimes have, and there weren't a lot of them, but there were several pro-life. I remember Heath Schuler, some of the others that you had out of North Carolina. There was a couple of others, Stan, that we had that would sign the briefs all the time on the life issue, and they were Democrats. So you'd have a brief you'd file to the Supreme Court representing Republicans and Democrats, bipartisan. Those days are pretty much, they are done. Is there a pro-life Democrat left?
There is. Dan Lipinski from Illinois in the House continues to fairly consistently support the measures. But, Jay, I'll tell you, the only reason he survives is because he's been able to beat back primary challenges from the pro-abortion left. So it has come at a political price even for him. And the political price for most of them has been they've lost their seat. And just one more example, Jay. Just this week, the House of Representatives passed a funding bill that essentially rolls back all of the pro-life rules that the Trump administration has put in place, including, Jay, the one we're talking about today. They would not only repeal this rule, but they would raise the Title X funding from $286 million to $400 million and allow that money to be taken away from women's health care and sent to abortion. It's just another example of elections having consequences.
All right, Charlotte on Facebook said, how will Planned Parenthood try and appeal this decision, or can they? Yes, they can, and they're going to do it en banc, Harry.
Yes, they will appeal this decision, and more likely than not, they will face not necessarily strong opposition from the en banc panel. Essentially, what Planned Parenthood will argue is that the law ought to be reinterpreted according to quote-unquote contemporary standards. And so if you look at the three district court decisions at issue here, 3 district courts effectively amended Section 1008 of the public health law, despite the fact that the text of the law explicitly prohibits funding for abortion-related programs. So I think it's clear beyond question that there is a quintessential problem in not only the courts, but in our law schools. We are simply not teaching law students how to read textual language free from political bias.
Well, Michael on Facebook says, if Democrats take Congress and the presidency, how extreme will they become? Will they increase Planned Parenthood funding? No,
yes.
Go ahead.
If the Democrats totally take over, I mean, Than just said it. They've already introduced legislation that is trying to undo every pro-life thing the current administration has done. I think that's very telling.
Yeah. So, Than, let's talk about that for a moment, because the fact of the matter is the reality of the situation is that that's exactly what they would do. I mean, and they're not. It's not like they're hiding the ball here. I mean, this is a platform they're running on. So I'm not saying this in a pejorative way. It's in fact the position they're advocating.
Yeah, no, it's front and center, Jay. In fact, I think they would be glad that you're advocating it because they're advocating it. 2 things. First of all, day one of an administration led by any of the candidates on the Democrat side of the aisle right now, the Mexico City policy, which President Trump reinstated, would be reinserted. That would allow your tax dollars to be used for abortion overseas. They would also immediately reverse several of the domestic rules, including this one we're talking about today, and Planned Parenthood would again have access to Title X funds. But, Jay, number 2, on the legislative side of the ledger, and I don't have time to go through everything, but let me just tell you what the Democrat House of Representatives did this week alone. Just this week, they passed a bill that would repeal the Title X ruling we're talking about today and increase the funding for that account from $286 million to $400 million. They repealed the Trump administration's conscience protection rule. They repealed the President Trump's rule on fetal tissue, which is human tissue from abortions being used for research. Jay, they repealed the Mexico City policy of President Trump. They reinstated funding for the United Nations Population Fund, which uses abortion as a method of family planning, and they plussed up that account to the tune of $750 million. Jay, to say nothing of the fact that in that same bill, they also blocked the president's transfer authority to use dollars to build the wall. So look, that's just a glimmer. That's a fraction of what you would see if you had Democrats running both the White House and both chambers of Congress.
No, I think that, look, don't think for a moment that wouldn't be the case. And again, as I said, they are running on this fact. Now, let's talk about Louisiana for a moment here. What do we got down there?
Okay, so Louisiana has some good pro-life legislation that we have followed all the way up. It's now in the Supreme Court, and it's the Gee case. And we have filed an amicus brief that's basically supporting Louisiana's interest in protecting human life, even a baby and the mother. And so our brief argues and touches on the fact that abortion is a potentially hazardous procedure, and the claim that abortion is safer than childbirth is a complete myth, and that published literature indicates that if anything, abortion is more dangerous than a continued pregnancy. We have 2.5 pages, which is only a small portion of the actual list of 911 calls that went out just in a year from abortion clinics taking a mother in an emergency, that something has gone wrong, bleeding, something has gone terribly wrong.
Yeah, so Louisiana is now again, these cases are going to, and look, there's a lot of them, and we're monitoring them all over the country, and we're engaging in them even at the district court level as these cases move forward, because what's happening is you don't know which one's going to end up at the Supreme Court. The fact of the matter is it's very hard to predict, to say that case is going to be the one that goes to the Supreme Court on this issue. So what we've decided internally here at the ACLJ is we're going to be involved in as many as we can really get done, which is a lot. We've got a big team because of your support of the ACLJ. So we are staying on top of that. I don't think there's going to be any major legislation on the federal level. That means the states where this is happening, the regulations are being put in place at the state level, and that's where you have to really focus our attention on the litigation, because I don't see a lot of movement. I mean, you had the Title X one, obviously a big win out of the Ninth Circuit for now, come just yesterday. But most of these regulations are going on the state level. But Planned Parenthood is going to be very, very aggressive in how they challenge these as well.
And here's the thing that we all have to understand too. Why are these legislators pushing abortion so much? Trust me, if you follow the money, Planned Parenthood supports these campaigns of all these Democrats, so they basically own them. I can recall in New York when we had that case, I think there were 59 at the city council. There were 59 city council members. I think only 5 of them were Republican, and almost every single one of those, we looked into it, Planned Parenthood had given to their campaign. So of course they were pushing Planned Parenthood's legislation because they own them, basically.
They're a formidable foe fan, no question about it.
Yeah, Cece's absolutely correct. Money's fungible. The Action Fund certainly supports these candidates, Jay. Again, the first step, let's not give them $563.8 million from U.S. taxpayers. That's step number one.
I agree. That's going to do it for the broadcast today. Let me encourage you to do something. As we talk about each of these cases all over the country, Louisiana, Missouri, California, Oregon, your support of the ACLJ allows us to engage these from the comment level all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. We're in a matching challenge campaign, which means any amount you donate to us, we get a matching gift for. Let me encourage you to do that at aclj.org.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org.